I was going to open just doing like the scream of the goats, but I think that probably would have been a little bit jarring and a little bit unfair. Ah! There we go. I feel better now. Thor! Love and Thunder. I have seen it. Actually, both my partner and I and a friend of ours all went to see it. So short version, I liked this. I like this a lot. Now, I've said in the past, I don't watch or read other people's reviews before I shoot my own. And that's still the case here. However, I have been able to pick up on a meta negative tone around this particular movie. And having now seen it, I don't really get why. I mean, I kind of do, but not really. So, like, I have a few senses of a few things that people don't care for because I did put out on Twitter, I don't see what your problems are. And some people did put forward some of the things that were issues for them with the movie. Some of which I seem to be very much personal taste, some of which seem to have been based off expectations, and some of which I'm not even going to argue against, but were just things that didn't bother me. So, yeah, I liked this a lot. And I say that as someone who actually, while liking Ragnarok, tends to feel it's kind of overrated by a lot of people. I'm not going to say at this point, because I have a history of being a little bit prisoner of the moment and kind of liking more stuff that is newer. But it's not going to be an easy call if and when I eventually do a ranking of Marvel films again, putting this or Ragnarok as the best Thor. It's definitely better than Dark World, and I think it's better than the first Thor film. That I feel very comfortable saying. Again, to my taste. People's big issue seems to be with the balance of the comedic and the dramatic elements. A lot of people saying that they didn't flow one to the other or one detracted from the other. I didn't find that to be the case. I didn't find that to be the case in the Ragnarok either. And while this one leans more into the comedy when it chooses to go comedic, I still didn't find that it was distracting. I didn't feel that it undermined the emotional moments, especially the ending. I mean, I'll give a spoiler warning before I get there, but I thought the climax was really good in this. And Marvel doesn't always have great climaxes. Actually, more often than not, tends to be one of the weaker elements of their films. So, yeah, I thought this was good stuff, folks. I just did. Hemsworth is continuing to mine his comedic timing, which he's really good for. Natalie Portman is clearly having so much more fun here than definitely than she had in The Dark World, and I think even more than she had in the first Thor movie, so that's wonderful to see. Tessa Thompson seems to still be having, that's the big thing. Everyone here seems to be having so much fun. It's kind of infectious. Similarly with Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe as Zeus, I'm not going to say it's a great performance, but it's a fun one. I enjoyed it. I honestly love the goats. I was kind of expecting the goats to get over me, but they never did. I love those stupid freaking goats, which are from the original mythology, by the way, that he had a couple of huge goats. So, I mean, I like that in and of itself as well. There's plenty of stuff I could nitpick, but as I said, by and large, it didn't bother me. There's really only two things that I can think of that I would look to and acknowledge as kind of being like, okay, but again, they didn't particularly bother me. There's Christian Bale's performance as Gore, the God Butcher, which is very good. There is a little bit of a disconnect in terms of the way he behaves with his sort of original motivation and also how he is at the very end versus how he kind of behaves a bit more gleefully villainous in the middle of it. One could feasibly make an argument that it's an issue of the Necrosword corrupting him, which isn't a trope that I love, but it's vague enough because I've even seen some people making arguments that no, that just gave him the ability to kill gods and it's physically corrupting him, but this is what he wanted to do anyway. I'm not entirely sure I buy that, but it is at least illustrative that there is wiggle room, that it's not as much a leaning on it like a crutch the way the Darkhold was with Wanda in Multiverse of Madness. And this also doesn't bother me, even though it's a similar thing, because Gore's not a pre-established character. I'm dealing with him strictly within the confines of this story. If I was only dealing with Wanda within the confines of Multiverse of Madness, I wouldn't bother me so much what they chose to do with her. It's the greater context where it annoys me, and Gore has no greater context. This is all we got. So while I'm not going to say it's amazing and narratively to lean on that crutch, it doesn't bother me nearly as much. And plus, as I said, Bale's a good villain here. He plays the pain of the character well. And also, when he is being a bit more outwardly villainously vicious, he's good at it. He's unsettling. And also, like, I get it. So, how do I want to put this? If you think about what it is that actually drives him, because this isn't, I've complained in other videos about depictions of faith and how people, like, having their faith broken, like, completely wrecks them or changes fundamentally who they are. He's not having his faith broken. He's having his reality broken. Because this is not just a matter of he prayed and his prayers wasn't answered. He went, saw his God face to face, said, I prayed to you. We need help. I needed help. My daughter's dead. And his God laughs at him. So if we want to take this out of purely religious context and we think of a God as a parental figure, a boss, and, you know, the president all rolled into one as far as an authority figure who is supposed to help or at least care, and they laugh in your face as you are dying and starving. Yeah, I get the anger. I get it, dude. I get it. So that's probably another reason why Gore, despite sort of a little bit of a roller coaster characterization, still really worked for me very well. I was iffy on how they handled the concept of eternity. I won't delve too much into this because it's a little bit spoiler, but I will say, initially being like, oh, I don't know about this, but then seeing that I think they actually nailed the visualization of eternity, which is not an easy thing to do. Eternity, they didn't even really delve fully into the concept of what eternity is, but they did handle the visualization quite well, I feel. So the one other sort of, it's not even really a complaint, but thing that I can look at and go, about it, but again, it didn't bother me for some reason. I don't know, maybe it's just the lightheartedness of the whole thing just makes me feel like the flaws are just not worth dwelling on that much, but I will freely admit that the story of Thor and Jane, well, what's going on with Jane in and of itself, and then the idea of them reconnecting or, you know, starting to build something up, that story and Gore the God Butcher aren't really stories that build off each other or rhyme thematically particularly well. On the other hand, they don't clash either, which is probably part of why it doesn't bother me. But if you're going to have two main threads that really don't have any reason to be connected, logistically, then it'd be nice if they connected more thematically. And at least from where I sit right now, they don't really. But that, at worst, is a little bit of a missed opportunity to make a better connection between the two. And again, it didn't really bother me all that much. Like, there were little moments I could pick on. There were moments of humor that didn't quite work. There were some bits that went for cringe humor, which I don't like, but they were over fairly quickly. Even some of the recurring bits that I'm like, that's not an amazing joke, but I'm happy to roll with it. Things like Stormbreaker being jealous of Mjolnir. I don't know. Even when it cropped up, I was like, okay. Even when the jokes didn't fully land, they didn't drag it down. I think that's the thing. Like, when a joke really lands with a thud, it drags the whole thing down. Here, the worst that any of the jokes hit for me was like, oh, okay. But then we move on, and we get a good joke a little bit later. So, yeah, I really had a lot of fun with this. And I do kind of want to talk spoileriness, because I want to talk about the climax and the resolution. So, that's your spoiler warning. I enjoyed this. I only kind of get why other people don't, but I like this a lot. So, now moving on. Okay, You had your spoiler warning. So, as far as the things towards the end, firstly, I love, I love that Thor powered up those kids. I had the biggest grin on my face, and especially that little girl with the stuffed rabbit. Yes. Yes. Liz particularly liked the girl who was like dressed as a fairy princess with like her wand and dealing with the shadow beast. I love it. I love that climax so much because it pulls back on what Thor said at the like towards the beginning when the kids were kidnapped. You are the bravest Asgardians I've ever known, and it feels like a payoff for that. They have been brave. They have been through hell, and it feels so much better for them not just to be rescued, but to get to tear through some of this crap they've been put through. I love it. Every second of it. I don't care what logistical problems people might feasibly have with it, whether they're going to go, oh, well, he never did anything like this before. I'm pretty sure that's covered by the fact that he seemed to do it through Thunderbolt rather than through Stormbreaker or any of his normal weapons. But even setting that aside, it's that or like, well, it's a Deus Ex Machina or whatever. It didn't feel like any of that to me. It felt like utter joy, and I loved it. Now, as far as the resolution after that, with Gore actually getting his wish, and, obviously he wanted to initially wish no more gods, and that hesitation, about maybe saving Jane, but then about his own daughter. And I like that just through the way characters look at each other and come to an understanding of what the right thing to do in a pretty messed up situation is. And I like a lot that Thor ends up with that kid, that he is finding a way to connect with her, that he's working on being a dad. Because the thing is, if we're going to compare that to the other option, which was to somehow save Jane, not that I'm saying like they should have saved Jane instead of saving a kid. Like if the story had been written in such a way that instead it would have resulted in her saving and maybe the kid wasn't even a factor. But if they were going to do something like that, I was honestly a little bit hesitant. Like I like seeing the two of them together in this story specifically. But can we be honest about a couple things? Thor's rekindled interest in her was more about him. Like, all respect to Star-Lord's perspective, being like, I feel real bad about, having lost love, but I'd rather feel bad than feel nothing. I'm not going to say there's no value in that, but that works for Quill as a way to look back on a relationship that has ended. For Thor to have that in his head as he is not only entering but re-entering an old relationship that already fell apart, what's another way to put that same sentiment? Better than nothing. I'm not sure that was the best headspace for him to start rekindling an interest with her. And even towards the end when he basically tells her, stay put, let me deal with this. Again, I get that he was, worried about her, all that, but his entire framing is about you matter too much to me. And I kind of like an ending that allows her to make her choice. And that, he did say, it's your choice and all that. So he didn't try and take her agency, but he did kind of try to make her dying about him. And understand, that's not a criticism. I'm actually not criticizing the movie. I don't think that's a bad thing because the movie does not ultimately pan out and now they're together and it works. I'm saying that I'm seeing these things like being reasons that maybe them getting back together isn't a good idea. And it becomes another reason why I really like him ending up with this kid. With a more complex relationship that he's not only trying to raise and take care of this kid, but also trying to instill the sense of right and wrong. I love him telling her as he's helping her put her boots on, if you see anyone smaller getting bullied, you help them. And it's presented like he's getting ready to send her off to school. Then they go off into battle to protect people who are being oppressed, who are being stormed over by a greater and more vicious force. I really like that ending. That put a smile on my face. And maybe part of that's me being a parent. Maybe that makes me a little bit more of an easy target for what this ending is doing. But I really, really liked it. And I think how strong the climax and then the resolution is, because like as it was going on, I could think in my mind so many possible ways that it could have gone that would have had me going, ugh, but it found the path through the setup that was created that just gave me the best feeling. I like this a lot. I don't think I have too much to say on post credits. You know, they introduced Hercules, which that's cool. Hercules is a fun character from the comics. I'm not entirely sure how he's going to slot in though, because if you're not a fan of the actual Marvel comics, funny thing about Thor in the MCU is they kind of gave Thor Hercules' personality, because in the comics, at least prior to the MCU, I haven't checked them out in a while, and I know that the comics have had a tendency to shift characters to make them more like their MCU counterparts, but traditionally Thor is a bit more of a stick-up-his-ass character, whereas sort of the fun-loving nature is much more in line with Hercules from the comics. So I'm curious as to what they're going to do with Hercules in the movies, since they kind of gave his personality to Thor. I don't know. We'll see. It was funny. It's also possible that part of the reason I like this so much was lowered expectations, because I'd seen, you know, a meh, you know, overall aggregate score from critics, and things on Twitter seem to be more complaining than praising it. So maybe I had lower expectations. I'm not going to discount that, but like I just enjoyed this. And visually, it's great. I love the draining of the color. The Shadow Realm was terrific. I just really liked this. I liked the presentation. The characters were fun. Everybody seemed to be having a great deal of fun with what they were doing. And even the moments where I'm like, none of that annoyance lingered. It was blip and it's gone. And then it was joy. Thor Love and Thunder. I like this a lot. And apparently at the moment that's a controversial opinion. I don't care. I really liked this. What did you think about it? Don't get into big fights in the comments if you can help it. But whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, and subscribe. Patreon's what pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living and talk to you folks as often and in the manners that I do. But even if you can't support me that way, the like, share, subscribe help me out. But don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so just come on back next time you need a break. Now my thanks to my highest supporting patrons. Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Karak, The Thing That Goes Doink in the Anime, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Udelki, The Oath the Boy, Bernabi Lax the Poodle, Zach, Idolin, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperol, Bookworm, Adam, RDL Taylor, Shane Ross, Jay Gorley, Brendan LaRose, and TT. If you want to hear me possibly butcher your name, check out the rewards on the Patreon. And thanks to all you folks.